back when I was still in college. This is the early days of my college years. Uh, there was an Aikido class offered on campus, and I attended there, and there were many interesting people that I met. One was this crazy dude. He'd show up to Aikido class. He was all into martial arts, but he was in it for the wrong reasons because he wanted power. You know, he just wanted the ability to be able to dominate another human being. And so what he would do was he would get like Black Belt magazine and all the crazy advertisements in there, the ones that had like these super hyped marketing, the ones that were like, learn how to defeat any man or any attacker, you know, just 10 seconds a day, or you know, whatever, and learn how to defeat anyone easily, you know, this kind of mega hyped marketing stuff. He ordered all the videos, all the instructionals from those kinds of crazy hyped companies, you know. And one of them that he ordered was the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu instructionals by Horion Gracie. You know, just because we knew about the Ultimate Fighting Championship, we were, you know, fans, so to say, and you know, so he wanted that kind of success right there that the Gracies had, so he ordered that, and we watched it together. He was really, really excited when it first came, but then he was really, really disappointed watching the video. He was like, man, I got duped, you know, this was a scam, Horion tricked me or whatever, basically because it was, you know, very solid basic stuff, you know, that required a lot of hard work. And what this guy was looking for was you know, like a cheat code, a way around all that. So he was real disappointed, and I was like, no, this is great stuff. This is excellent stuff, you know. And he was like, well, if you say so, I don't really understand this stuff. So what I want you to do is I want you to watch this video, learn it, practice it, then explain it to me. That's what he said. You know, he's like, I'm going to lend you these videos, and I want you to break it down for me and do that, right? And I was like, hey, that sounds like a good deal. Sure, I'll do that, you know. And you know, for me, back way back when I was a little kid, all right, I was real sick. So the first time I watched pro wrestling, I was like, whoa, look at these guys, man. They're like Conan the Barbarian, you know. I want to be like that. And that was in the U.S. when I was a little kid. You know, I saw that and I was like, wow, that's amazing. And then we moved back to Japan. This is the second time, but we moved back to Japan. I was still a kid. And, you know, during Friday nights, I guess, they were showing, maybe Saturday nights, professional wrestling. And during dinner time, my family, the whole family, we would watch professional wrestling. It was a spectacle. Dad enjoyed it. Mom enjoyed it. And, of course, I enjoyed it. And, you know, so I really kind of got into pro wrestling while I was in Japan over there. And what I didn't realize was, you know, there were some weird matches going on. And I kind of noticed that they were weird, but I didn't know what exactly was going up. So sometimes I would see a guy, you know, wearing boxing gloves and stuff like that. What I was watching was there were some shoot fights going on. And even the professional wrestling organization in Japan at the time was transforming. You know, the emergence of the UWF. And I didn't understand what the UWF was, other than they were just you know, like a renegade group of guys, you know, and they were the new bad guys, you know, and I didn't really understand it, but I knew something was weird, you know, something was strange, and the way those guys fought was a little bit different, you know, and blah, 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 blah. So basically what I'm trying to say was I grew up with catch wrestling. You know, because catch wrestling, or catch-ass, catch-can wrestling, came to Japan through the professional wrestlers, and they kind of inherited it, where it sort of died out in the U.S., which is very unfortunate, you know. But so Japan kind of retained that, and later on with organizations like Pride and stuff like that, you get to see it come back, and you know, in all its glory. You know, you get to see the art of catch wrestling, you know, come back. But until then, I had been very familiar with this kind of grappling. Not real familiar, but I had seen this kind of stuff. So when I came back to the U.S. again and studying martial arts and stuff, first started training in Kuk Sool Won, and now I was in college doing this Aikido stuff. All the joint locks, wrist locks, arm locks, this was all very, very familiar to me. So that's basically submission holds. Even though we did it standing, they were still joint locks and chokes and stuff. So, this was, very comfortable for me, even though I wasn't a good wrestler or anything like that. And then, because I really like that pro wrestling stuff, there was Judo Gene LaBelle that you heard about over here in Black Belt magazine, and maybe he had a video advertised in professional wrestling magazines over here. So I got to look at that stuff, and I bought his book, Grappling Master, I think was the title, and it showed like this incredible amount of submission holds and stuff, and I got to study and play around with it. So catch wrestling to me, I was sort of into it before it became popular, before the UFC and stuff like that. And so anyway, back in college, okay, way later, back in college, I'm looking at this video from Rorion Gracie, and I'm going, you know what, this is what I need, because even though it's basic, it shows how to get into the moves. It shows the setups. It shows the overall strategy. And on top of that, the Royce Gracie, through the UFC, actually showed what it looks like against a totally resisting opponent, a guy that was bigger than him, trying to swing and take his head off. They showed that, so to explain it is one thing, but then to see it was a huge deal. So I got to see all of that, and it was really, really great. Don't get me wrong, Gene LaBelle, his book was awesome, but it showed a whole bunch of crazy moves, and it didn't show you how to get into them. So I guess for someone who's looking for like an encyclopedia, that's what he wanted to do, was to make an encyclopedia and just show all these different, submission holds, and he succeeds at that. But the Gracie instructional, on the other hand, remember, I'm comparing a video to a book, so it's not a fair comparison, but on the other hand, he only shows a handful of moves, but shows you how to get into them. And I remember one of the last moves they showed in the video was how to escape the guard. And, he puts his arm in there, and, we were going, wow, that just sets you up for a triangle choke, which we found out when the UFC 4 had just occurred, where Royce Gracie submits Dan Severn with a triangle choke. So we were like, are they setting us up or what? I use this escape and I get triangled by, a Gracie guy. What the heck is up with that? But, Royce later on said that I never get triangle choked using this escape. But I also have a feeling that if he went up against some of the top jiu-jitsu guys, he's going to get triangle choked if he uses that escape. So anyway, I think the bottom line is you got to know the move like the back of your hand. There's no miracle move, But that move teaches you some of the real basic ideas of how to pass the guard. So it's either way, it's good to learn. But anyway, so the guy that I talked about before in my Aikido class, his name was B. He's an excellent wrestler. The guy, after one day, one of the days, he just came up to me and challenged me. This was not uncommon, by the way. And one thing about his challenge matches that we had, like I said, 90% of the time, or almost every time, it was just only grappling, no striking, But a lot of the times, the guy would pull a fast one on me, and he would be like, hey, do you want to wrestle? And I'd be like, okay, sure, sure, B, I'll do it. And the guy, before I say, are we going to start standing or on the ground or whatever, the guy would just shoot in. And that's when it starts, was when he shoots in. So, I mean, like, great, he was that kind of guy, So anyway, this one time, we grappled, I remember, and the guy, I was able to put him into my guard, right? And from there, I was relaxing and trying to stay calm, just like the video said, and just how, I'm having these visual images of Royce Gracie in the UFC, you know, and I could almost see him breathe and all that. So I'm just trying to relax, catch my breath. And then from there, this all happens very quickly. Okay, so it wasn't long in the match. The guy's just trying to get out of my guard, and you know, I think a lot of wrestlers had the mentality at the time to really disrespect the guard. They were just like, you know, you're pinned. You know, this is a dumb position, whatever. So he feels like he could just break out of it. So he shoves his arm in, and I'm going, wow, this is exactly what I had just, you know, talked about, and what we were just going over is the guy shoves his arm in and he lands in a triangle, and guess what? He landed in my triangle. He threw himself into my triangle. And I was like, okay, I got the triangle. Perfect, you know, and I knew which way the legs went and everything like that. So I locked it in. But the thing was, I didn't know how to submit the guy with the triangle, because in the videos, you know, they don't show the triangle, and not in, at least in the videos that we got, they didn't cover the triangle. And of course, you know, by watching the UFC 4 where Hoist does it once, you know, I couldn't figure out how does he, you know, make the choke happen. So I'm there with the triangle, not knowing how to do the choke, and he, you know, doesn't like it at all. So he's getting angry, real angry. He's trying to get out. And I got this choke, just as in the triangle choke, you know, looks wise, but I don't know how to apply the choke. And we're there for a little while. If I knew what I was doing, I could have, you know, put the guy to sleep. But because I didn't know what to do, I was just like, okay, what do I do? You know, I don't know how to squeeze this thing. And the guy picks me up. This is how strong the guy was, okay? The guy just picks me up, or should I say how light I was compared to him. He picks me up all the way up, right, from that position, and just holds me up in the air, right? So if you could just imagine, I still have the triangle, but I am completely in the air. I'm basically sitting up. And then from there, I tap on his head, and I go, hey, B, you know, let me down here. I don't want to get slammed. You know, you're going to drop me on my head, you know. And I was like, dude, okay, you win, you know. So I'm tapping on the guy, and I remember he goes, okay, you know, he was like, okay, fine, or I feel him relax or whatever. And so I let go of my legs, and I remember hopping off his shoulder. So it's like I just came down the second story, you know, because I was literally really up in the air. And so I hopped down. And he's furious, you know. He was really upset. I think that he couldn't get out of the guard, or when he tried to, it landed him in a worse position, you know. So he just kind of took off like that. He was almost sociopathic, right? And for me, ultra competitive, no personality, that type of that kind of thing, you know. And just okay, to say something good about the guy, he's a born killer. How about that? And for me, I was just amazed. I was amazed at how perfectly he fell into the plan. You know, the guy passes my guard, falls into a triangle. I didn't even really have to do anything. The only problem was, like I said, I didn't know how to finish the choke. But that's probably one of the times where I became a true believer in the effectiveness. And I was like, man, I need to learn how to finish this triangle choke. Oh, and by the way, you know, the reason why we ordered these instructional videos instead of going to a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school was because at the time there was none, absolutely none in the area, zero. And even in the whole state, maybe there was one that was for sure, you know. So all these other ones were, you know, non-existent. Maybe there was one, you know, that teaching out of a garage or something like that, you know, one or two like that, but non-existent.